You think you know the man you love until you see the actual price tag he puts on your life. Caleb owed $800,000 to the city's most brutal syndicate. To save his own skin, he traded me. But he never expected the monster to claim his sacrifice. I used to believe that love was about sacrifice. For 3 years, I had sacrificed everything for Caleb. I worked double shifts at a dingy downtown diner, burning my hands on industrial coffee machines just to keep our tiny drafty apartment in Chicago afloat. I was an Omega, but I hid it well. I took my suppressants religiously masking my natural scent of vanilla and spun sugar under layers of harsh, chemical-heavy laundry detergent. Caleb, a mid-tier alpha with a charming smile and a disastrous gambling addiction, always promised me that his next hand of poker would be the one to turn our lives around. "Just one more game, Liam," he would say, his hands shaking as he grabbed the meager tips I'd brought home in a glass jar. "I've got a feeling about tonight. I swear on my life this is the one." I should have known his promises were as empty as our bank account. The signs of his drowning were everywhere. The bruised knuckles he tried to hide the sudden terrifying phone calls in the middle of the night, the heavy, sour stench of anxiety that tainted his normally pleasant cedar scent. But I loved him, or at least I loved the man I thought he could be. I kept making excuses for him until the night the excuses violently ran out. It was a freezing Tuesday in November when Caleb came home entirely sober, which was the first red flag. He was practically vibrating with a manic, terrified energy. He had bought me a suit, a sleek, tailored black suit that cost more than our last 3 months of rent combined. When I asked him where he got the money, he just smiled, though his eyes were wide and bloodshot. He told me he'd finally hit the big one. He said he had arranged a meeting with his investors to clear his debts for good, and he needed me by his side to celebrate. Like a fool, I put the suit on. The car ride was silent, suffocating, under the weight of Caleb's erratic pheromones. He smelled like burnt rubber and sheer panic. We didn't pull up to a fancy restaurant in the Loop, as I had expected. Instead, we drove to the industrial district, pulling up to a heavily guarded, unmarked warehouse that looked like it swallowed people whole. Men in tailored suits, with visible bulges under their jackets, watched us with dead eyes. "Caleb, where are we?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. My Omega instincts were screaming at me to run, to flee this territory. The air inside the building was thick with dominating aggressive alpha scents. "Just trust me, Liam. Keep your head down, don't speak unless spoken to, and let me do the talking," Caleb muttered, gripping my wrist so tightly it bruised. We were escorted into a vast, dimly lit room that looked more like an underground casino mixed with an executive boardroom. At the far end of the long mahogany table sat Dominic Russo. Even if you didn't know his name, you would know exactly what he was. Dominic was a prime alpha, a rarity that ruled the criminal underworld with absolute authority. His scent hit me before he even spoke, a dark, intoxicating blend of crushed pine needles, smoke, and old money. It bypassed my suppressants completely, making my knees tremble. He sat back in a leather armchair, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. His sharp, predatory eyes locked onto Caleb. He didn't even look at me. Not at first. "Caleb." Dominic's voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here. You owe my organization $800,000. The deadline was yesterday. My men were supposed to break your legs this morning, but you called and said you had an alternative payment." Caleb fell to his knees, literally dropped to the dirty concrete floor, dragging me down by the sleeve of my new suit. "Mr. Russo, please. I don't have the cash. The game was rigged, I swear it. But I brought you something better. Dominic raised a single dark eyebrow, finally shifting his gaze to me. His eyes were the color of a stormy sea, cold and unfathomable. I am not in the business of trading in junk, Caleb. He's not junk. Caleb's voice cracked in desperation. He grabbed my shoulders, pushing me forward like a piece of livestock at an auction. This is Liam. He's an Omega, an unregistered one. He's pure, he's clean, he takes his suppressants, but he's fertile. You run the underground clubs, you know what a young, healthy Omega goes for on the black market. Take him, and clear my debt. Please God, just let me walk away. The world stopped spinning. The air left my lungs in a violent rush. I stared at Caleb, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to laugh and say it was a sick joke. But the tears streaming down his cowardly face were real. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. The man I had starved for the man I had given my youth to had just handed me over to a mafia boss to pay off his poker debts. The silence in the room was deafening. Then Dominic Russo slowly stood up. He walked around the table, his heavy footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He stopped right in front of me, his massive frame blocking out the light. He leaned down, his nose brushing against my jawline. I was paralyzed, terrified to breathe. He inhaled deeply, bypassing the chemical detergent, finding the terrified weeping Omega underneath. Vanilla. Dominic murmured, his voice suddenly husky, his eyes flashing crimson for a fraction of a second. And sorrow. He straightened up, looking down at Caleb with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. You are a pathetic excuse for an alpha. But the debt is settled. Leave before I decide your life is worth taking anyway. Thank you, Mr. Russo. Thank you. Caleb scrambled to his feet, a pathetic sob of relief tearing from his throat. He turned and ran toward the door. He didn't look back. He didn't say goodbye. He just left me there, shivering in my expensive suit, the property of a monster. I spent the next 3 days in a golden cage. Dominic didn't throw me into a dungeon or lock me in a basement like I had feared. Instead, I was taken to his private penthouse at the top of a glittering skyscraper overlooking the city. The suite was bigger than the entire apartment building I had shared with Caleb, decorated in cold, modern tones of black, grey, and silver. I had a king-sized bedclothes that fit me perfectly, and a kitchen stocked with more food than I had seen in my entire life. But I was a prisoner. The heavy oak doors were guarded by 2 silent enforcers, and the elevator required a biometric scan to operate. My suppressants had been confiscated the moment I arrived. You won't be needing these anymore, Liam. Dominic had told me softly that first night, tossing the little plastic bottle into the fireplace. I don't want to smell chemicals. I want to smell you. Without the medication, my true nature rushed to the surface with a vengeance. My scent bloomed thick and sweet, filling the penthouse. It was humiliating. Every time Dominic walked into the room, my body betrayed me. The prime alpha aura he projected was intoxicating, designed by nature to make Omegas submit. Whenever he was near, my pulse raced, my skin flushed, and a deep instinctual part of my brain urged me to bare my neck to him. I fought it with every ounce of willpower I had left. I hated him for buying me, and I hated myself for how my body reacted to him. Yet Dominic was completely confusing. He didn't force himself on me. He didn't lay a violent hand on me. He sat with me during meals, asked me about my life, and listened with an intense, burning focus that made me feel entirely exposed. It was psychological warfare, and I was losing. On the 4th evening, the fragile peace shattered. I was sitting in the library staring blankly at a book when Dominic entered. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit, minus the tie, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright, fixed on me, with a terrifying hunger. He poured himself a drink and sat in the leather chair opposite mine. "Are you comfortable, Liam?" he asked, his voice low. "I'm a captive." I spat back, clutching the book to my chest. Comfort doesn't really factor into it. A faint, dangerous smile played on his lips. "You think you were free before living in squalor, freezing in the winter, starving yourself so a pathetic gambling addict could throw away your wages on a rigged deck of cards. You were always a captive little Omega. The only difference is Caleb didn't know your worth. I do." "He was weak," I said, my voice trembling, "but he loved me. He just got in too deep." Dominic let out a harsh, barking laugh. It lacked any real humor. "Loved you? Liam, let me tell you a secret about your precious Caleb." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his pine and smoke scent rolling over me in waves. He didn't stumble into an $800,000 hole by accident. I own the tables he played at. I own the bookies he borrowed from. I instructed my dealers to let him win just enough to get hooked, and then I buried him in debt. My breath hitched. The room began to spin. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I orchestrated the whole thing," Dominic confessed, his eyes darkening. "I saw you 6 months ago at that miserable diner. You dropped a plate and your manager screamed at you until you were shaking. You were terrified, but you stood your ground. I smelled through your cheap suppressants. I wanted you. But I am a businessman, Liam. I don't steal, I acquire. I knew Caleb was dragging you down, so I simply gave him the shovel to dig his own grave. I knew exactly what he would offer me when his back was against the wall." Tears blurred my vision. The sheer magnitude of the manipulation was suffocating. I wasn't just betrayed. I was hunted. "You're a monster. I am an alpha," he corrected softly, standing up and closing the distance between us. "And you are mine." Before I could formulate a response, the heavy library doors swung open. 2 of Dominic's guards dragged a bloody, bruised figure into the room, tossing him onto the Persian rug. It was Caleb. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes torn, his face swollen. "Mr. Russo." Caleb begged, spitting blood onto the carpet. "I got it. I hit a massive parlay. I have 300 grand. I can get the rest, I swear. Just let me buy him back. Please, I made a mistake." I froze. Caleb had actually come back for me. A twisted mix of hope and fury flared in my chest. I looked at Dominic, waiting to see what the mob boss would do. Dominic didn't even look at the money Caleb's trembling hands were trying to offer. He looked only at me. The Prime Alpha's dominance flared so violently the windows seemed to rattle. He grabbed my jaw, tilting my head back, exposing my vulnerable throat. "Watch closely, Caleb." Dominic growled, his voice dropping to a demonic guttural register. "Watch what happens to things that belong to me." Caleb screamed. "No, don't touch him." But he was too late. Dominic's eyes glowed a terrifying, brilliant crimson. His jaw unhinged slightly, his elongated alpha fangs dropping. He leaned down, and right as Caleb let out a shattered, agonizing sob, Dominic's teeth sank deep into the mating gland on my neck. Pain and overwhelming, intoxicating euphoria exploded through my veins. The bond snapped into place, instantly tying my soul to the Underworld boss. Caleb was crying hysterically on the floor, watching the man he sold become permanently branded by the monster who bought him. The fire in my veins wasn't just pain. It was an absolute, fundamental rewriting of my biology. As Dominic's teeth broke the skin of my mating gland, A searing heat washed away the freezing terror I had carried for years. It was an agonizing ecstasy. The scent of crushed pine and smoke didn't just surround me anymore. It became a part of me, settling deep into my marrow. I collapsed against Dominic's broad chest, my legs completely giving out. His powerful arms caught me instantly, holding me flush against his rapidly beating heart. Through the roaring in my ears, I could hear Caleb. His sobs were no longer just sounds of fear. They were the pathetic, shattered whimpers of a man who realized he had truly lost everything. "Liam, no." Caleb dry-heaved on the floor, his hands desperately clawing at the Persian rug. "You can't. He's a monster. I came back for you. I had the money." Dominic withdrew his fangs slowly, his tongue soothing the puncture wounds in a gesture so intimate it made my breath hitch. He turned his head, his crimson eyes locking onto the broken alpha on the floor. The sheer force of Dominic's pheromones was suffocating, commanding absolute submission. "You came back because your guilt outweighed your cowardice for exactly 5 minutes, Caleb." Dominic's voice was a lethal whisper that echoed in the silent library. "You didn't come to save him. You came to save your own conscience, but it's too late. He is marked. He is my mate, and you are nothing." I couldn't speak. The mating bond was flooding my system with a dizzying cocktail of endorphins and alpha-driven security. For the first time in my life, my Omega instincts weren't screaming at me to hide or run. They were purring, basking in the protection of a prime. It was terrifying how quickly my body betrayed my mind. "Get him out of my sight," Dominic ordered the 2 enforcers. "Don't kill him. Death is too brief. Let him wander the streets, knowing what he threw away. Freeze his accounts. Blacklist him from every club employer and rat-hole apartment building in this city. He ceases to exist in Chicago." "No, please, Liam. Look at me. Tell him to stop," Caleb screamed as the guards dragged him backward by his collar. I turned my head, my cheek resting against Dominic's warm chest. I looked at Caleb. I looked at the man who had traded me to a syndicate to save his own skin. The man who had lied to me, used my meager earnings, and treated my loyalty like garbage. The mating bond amplified my emotions, burning away the lingering attachment I had. All that was left was cold, hard clarity. "Goodbye, Caleb." I whispered the words, tasting like ash but bringing a profound sense of closure. The heavy library doors slammed shut, cutting off his final wretched cry. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by my ragged breathing. Dominic scooped me up into his arms, effortlessly, carrying me out of the library and down the long hallway toward the master suite. My head spun. The heat of the bond was pushing me dangerously close to an induced heat. "You're shaking, little Omega," Dominic murmured, pushing open the bedroom doors. He laid me gently on the massive king-sized bed, his large hands carefully brushing the sweat-dampened hair from my forehead. "You planned all of this," I gasped, clutching the lapels of his charcoal suit, torn between the urge to strike him and the desperate need to pull him closer. "You ruined my life just to trap me." "I destroyed a cage you didn't know you were locked in," Dominic corrected, sitting on the edge of the bed. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, his expression softening into something entirely foreign to the ruthless mob boss I had seen minutes ago. "I gave you a choice, Liam. Even tonight when Caleb came back. If you had reached for him, if you had fought me, I wouldn't have bitten you. But you didn't fight." He was right. I had frozen, but deep down, a twisted part of me wanted the protection he offered. Over the next 2 weeks, the reality of my new life set in. The mating drop, the hormonal crash following a forced bond, was brutal, but Dominic rarely left my side. He wasn't the monster Caleb had warned me about, at least not to me. He brought in his private physician, Dr. Harrison Wright, a stern but gentle man who monitored my health and flushed years of toxic suppressants from my liver. He introduced me to his financial advisor, Arthur Davies, a brilliant beta, who began transferring assets into my name. "You are my mate, Liam," Dominic explained one evening, sliding a titanium credit card across the island. "That means half of this empire is yours. You aren't a pet. You are my equal." It was a staggering transition. I went from scrubbing diner counters to having a portfolio worth millions. But the twist came not from the money, but from what Arthur Davies uncovered when he dug into Caleb's frozen assets at my request. I wanted to see exactly how much debt Caleb had accrued before the final poker game. What Arthur found changed everything. Caleb hadn't just been losing my tip money. For 3 years, Caleb had been quietly siphoning funds from a small trust left to me by my late grandfather, a trust I thought was emptied during my mother's illness. Caleb had forged my signature. He stole over $200,000 long before he met Dominic Russo. When Arthur handed me the bank statements, the paper trembled in my hands. The betrayal was so absolute, so vile, that any lingering pity I had for Caleb evaporated entirely. "What do you want to do about this?" "Liam," Dominic asked, standing behind my chair, his heavy hands resting on my shoulders, projecting a wave of calming, supportive alpha energy through our bond. I stared at the forged signatures. A cold, hard resolve crystallized in my chest. "I want to destroy him," I said, my voice steady and void of mercy. "I want to do it myself, completely and utterly. Right now." Dominic didn't laugh, and he didn't coddle me. He simply nodded, his eyes gleaming with a dark, proud satisfaction. "Then he is yours to break. Tell Arthur exactly what you need. My network is your network. My men are your men." It took less than 48 hours to orchestrate the trap. I didn't want Caleb dead. As Dominic had said, death was too brief, too easy an escape for a man who had built his life on cowardice and theft. I wanted him to experience the exact same crushing, suffocating helplessness he had subjected me to for 3 years. Using Arthur Davies's connections within the city's banking sector, I quietly purchased the dilapidated motel on the outskirts of the city where Caleb had been hiding since Dominic froze his accounts and blacklisted him. Then I bought up every single marker, IOU, and outstanding loan Caleb had acquired from the lower-tier loan sharks who operated outside of Dominic's direct control. I became his sole creditor. I owned his roof, and I owned his life. The confrontation happened on a bleak, rainy Thursday morning. I didn't wear a cheap, chemical-soaked sweater this time. I wore a tailored midnight blue trench coat, my mating mark proudly displayed on my neck, radiating the unmistakable, terrifying scent of Dominic Russo's prime alpha protection. I was flanked by 2 of Dominic's most imposing enforcers, but I walked through the rain under my own umbrella, holding my head high. We kicked the door to room number 12 open. The smell of cheap booze, stale cigarette smoke, and unwashed alpha hit me instantly. Caleb was passed out on a stained mattress, surrounded by empty bottles and losing lottery tickets. He jolted awake at the sound of the door crashing against the wall, scrambling backward until his back hit the cheap headboard. When his bloodshot eyes focused on me, his jaw dropped. He looked at the tailored clothes, the expensive watch on my wrist, and finally the scarred mating bite on my neck. "Liam," he croaked, his voice raw and pathetic. He practically crawled off the bed, falling to his knees. "Liam, oh my God, you came back for me. I knew you wouldn't leave me. I knew you still loved me. Please tell these guys to back off. Tell Dominic you want me instead." The sheer audacity of his delusion almost made me laugh. I stepped into the dingy room, my polished leather boots stopping inches from his trembling fingers. "I didn't come to save you, Caleb," I said, my voice icy, devoid of any warmth or affection. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila folder, tossing it onto the floor in front of him. "I came to collect." Caleb stared at the folder, his hands shaking as he opened it. Inside were copies of the forged trust documents, the bank transfers, and a meticulously compiled ledger of every single debt he now owed me. His face went completely pale, his sickly cedar scent souring with absolute visceral terror. "You stole from my grandfather's trust," I stated the words sharp and lethal. $240,000. You forged my signature while I was working double shifts, burning my hands with hot coffee to pay our rent. You drained my family's legacy to fund your gambling, and then when you finally ran out of other people's money, you sold my physical body to cover your tracks. Liam, I can explain. It was a mistake. I was going to win it back and buy you a house. I swear I was doing it for us." He babbled, tears streaming down his filthy face as he reached out to grab my ankle. One of the enforcers stepped forward, placing a heavy boot squarely on Caleb's wrist, pinning it to the floor. Caleb screamed in pain, but I didn't even flinch. I just stared down at him, feeling absolutely nothing but disgust. "There's nothing to explain," I said smoothly, feeling a dark, empowering thrill course through my veins. This was what power felt like. This was why Dominic ruled the city. As of this morning, I hold all your debts. I also own this miserable motel. You are being evicted immediately. Furthermore, Arthur Davies has forwarded the evidence of your wire fraud and forgery to the district attorney. The police are already on their way. You aren't just broke, Caleb. You're going to federal prison for a very long time. No, you can't do this. I'm your alpha. We were supposed to be together forever. He shrieked, thrashing violently against the dirty floorboards. You are nothing to me, I corrected him, my voice echoing with finality. My alpha is waiting for me at home. Have a nice life, Caleb. Try not to gamble away your commissary money behind bars. I turned on my heel and walked out of the motel room, stepping back into the cleansing rain. I didn't look back as Caleb sobbed uncontrollably, the pathetic sound drowned out by the thunder and the low hum of my waiting town car. The heavy weight I had carried for 3 agonizing years vanished entirely, washed away by the storm. When I returned to the penthouse, Dominic was waiting for me in the grand foyer. He took one look at my face, deeply inhaled my newly settled scent, and smiled a genuine, fiercely proud smile. He didn't ask how it went. He already knew. I walked straight into his arms, wrapping my hands around his neck and pressing my face into his shoulder, breathing in the comforting scent of pine and smoke. Is it done, little Don? Dominic murmured softly, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of my head, his arms locking securely around my waist. It's completely done, I whispered back, closing my eyes and sinking into his warmth. I was an Omega, yes, but I was no longer a victim. I was Liam Russo, the marked mate of the most powerful man in Chicago, and I had finally learned exactly how to play the game. Liam's brutal, calculated revenge on Caleb proves that karma never misses. His journey from a betrayed, helpless Omega to a powerful, fearless Don's mate is incredibly thrilling to witness. If you loved this intense, twist-filled Omegaverse drama, please smash that like button. Right now, share this video with all your friends who love stories involving justice power and undeniable mating bonds. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to catch every single new upload today.